Rosrod still submitted his application.
Someone like you dares to register for the competition?
I'll participate, sir.
Garrett Sinclair tore it in half.
A delivery boy wants to be my rival?
He leaned in.
Do you even know what an engine looks like, or just bring parts to those who do?
I know what
I
a broken engine sounds like. Garrett's face twisted. He ripped the Ferrari key from his pocket and slammed it against Rosrod's chest.
1 hour. Fix the engine. Live. You fail, you crawl out on your knees. Deal?
Rashad caught the key, held it to the light. Gently, calmly.
An hour is too generous, Mr. Sinclair. Just 5 minutes.
Garrett's laughter died in his throat. But what would choke him, what would silence every voice in the building, hadn't begun yet. 3 weeks earlier, Rashad Brooks rode his bicycle 14 miles through the dark streets of Detroit. Same route every morning, same cracked pavement, same cold air cutting through a jacket far too thin for early October. He pulled up to the service entrance of Cobalt Engineering at 5:48 a.m. The building rose 12 stories of glass and steel against the gray sky. Inside, engineers worked under white lights with machines worth more than every house on Rashad's block combined. CNC lathes that cut metal to 1/1000th of a millimeter, robotic arms that assembled parts with surgical precision. The kind of technology most people only saw in documentaries. Rashad saw it every day. He just wasn't allowed to touch any of it. His job was simple: show up before anyone else, unload deliveries from the loading dock, sort parts into bins, push a metal cart from floor to floor, dropping off components to labs where engineers in pressed white coats never looked up when he walked in, never said thank you, never learned his name. To them, he was the cart. The cart came, the cart left. That was all. His employee badge read Delivery Associate. The pay was $11.60 an hour. No benefits, no health insurance, no pathway to anything. But it was the only place that called him back after 43 applications, and he needed every dollar. His sister, Janelle, was 16. Rent was due in 9 days. The lights had already been shut off twice this year, so Rashad pushed the cart, kept his head down, and kept his mouth shut. Garrett Sinclair arrived at Cobalt Engineering every morning at exactly 9:15 in a black Ferrari 488 Spider. He parked in the spot closest to the front entrance, the spot with his name painted on the concrete in white block letters. The security guard opened the glass door for him before he reached it, every single morning. He was 34 years old, vice president of engineering, son of Howard Sinclair, the man who founded Cobalt from a rented garage in 1986. Garrett had never applied for his position, never interviewed, never competed for it. The name on the parking spot was the same name on the building. He wore slim gray suits, a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than Rashad would earn in 5 years, Oxford shoes polished to a mirror shine. His hands were smooth, clean, moisturized. They had never held a wrench under pressure, never bled into an engine block at 2 in the morning. But the company treated him like a genius, because his father told them to. Garrett had a habit, a pattern that everyone noticed but no one mentioned. He gave the worst assignments to the employees who looked like Rashad, the tightest deadlines, the heaviest loads, the jobs no one wanted. And when review season came, those same employees always scored lowest, always got let go first, always heard the same line: not the right fit for the culture. No one filed complaints, because complaints went to Garrett's desk, and Garrett's desk had a shredder. The first time Rashad crossed Garrett's path was on a Tuesday morning in September. Rashad was pushing the cart through the third-floor hallway, delivering a crate of titanium valve springs to Lab 7. The crate weighed 40 pounds. He carried it with both arms. Garrett came around the corner with 3 engineers behind him. He saw Rashad, stopped walking. The engineers stopped too. "You're in my hallway." Rashad stepped to the side, pressing his back against the wall to make room. "Sorry, sir. Just delivering to Lab 7. Garrett didn't move. He looked at Rashad the way someone looks at a stain on a clean floor. Then he pointed at the crate. "Put that down." Rashad set it down carefully. Garrett nudged it with the toe of his Oxford shoe. "These are precision components. Titanium. Do you even know what titanium is?" "Yes, sir." "I doubt that." Garrett turned to the engineers behind him. "This is why I keep saying we need to automate deliveries. Replace the human error." He looked back at Rashad. "You can pick it up now." The engineers didn't laugh. They didn't need to. The silence said enough. Rashad picked up the crate, walked to Lab 7, set it down on the receiving table. His hands were shaking, not from the weight, from the effort of keeping his mouth shut. That was the first time. It wasn't the last. The second time was worse. 2 weeks later, the company cafeteria, lunch hour. Rashad sat alone at a corner table, eating a peanut butter sandwich he'd made at home. The cafeteria served grilled salmon and roasted vegetables for $8 a plate. Rashad had never bought a meal there. He couldn't afford to. Garrett walked in with a group of senior engineers, loud, laughing. He spotted Rashad in the corner and stopped mid-sentence. "Hold on." He raised his voice just enough for the room to hear. "Since when do delivery guys eat in the engineering cafeteria?" A few people looked up. The room got quieter. Rashad kept chewing, didn't look up. Garrett walked closer, stood right next to the table. "I'm serious. Is there not a break room downstairs? A loading dock with a bench? Somewhere more appropriate for someone in your position?" One of the engineers behind Garrett chuckled, then another. The sound spread like a small fire catching dry wood. Rashad wrapped up his sandwich, stood up, picked up his tray, walked out without a word. He ate the rest of his lunch sitting on an overturned crate behind the loading dock, alone. The October wind cut through his thin jacket. He didn't go back inside until his break was over. Nolan Tucker found him there 10 minutes later. Nolan worked in the warehouse, a stocky man in his 40s with grease-stained coveralls and kind eyes. The only person at Cobalt who called Rashad by his first name. "I heard what happened up there." Nolan sat on the crate next to him. "You know more about engines than half the guys in that cafeteria. I've seen you looking at the schematics on the delivery manifests. You read them like other people read newspapers." Rashad stared at his sandwich. "Doesn't matter what I know. Matters what badge I'm wearing." "That's not true." "Isn't it?" Rashad looked at him. 43 applications, Nolan. 43. Every shop, every garage, every factory in the city. You know how many called me back for an interview? 1. This one. For a delivery job. Nolan didn't answer. There was nothing to say that Rashad didn't already know. 3 days later, the email went out. Every screen in every office at Cobalt Engineering displayed the same announcement. Brenda Holloway, the HR director, had drafted it personally on orders from Howard Sinclair himself. Engine Masters Challenge. Open to all. No restrictions on title, department, or education. A live competition to find the best mechanical mind at Cobalt Engineering. 3 rounds. Live streamed globally. Judged by an independent panel of industry legends. The prize? $1 million and a full-time contract as lead engineer on Cobalt's next-generation engine project. Howard Sinclair had added a personal note at the bottom. "I built this company from a garage with borrowed tools. I don't care about your degrees. I care about hands that know what they're doing. Show me what you've got." The hallways buzzed. Engineers talked about it at every coffee station, every elevator ride, every bathroom break. Garrett Sinclair barely blinked. He told his team he'd win by the second round. "It's a formality," he said, adjusting his watch. "Dad's just putting on a show for the board." Nobody expected a delivery associate to register. But on Thursday night, long after the offices had emptied and the lights had dimmed, Rashad Brooks stood alone in front of the registration desk in the first-floor lobby. A single fluorescent light buzzed above him. The sign-up sheet sat under a clear acrylic stand. He stared at it for 3 full minutes. His pen hovered above the paper. His hand was steady. His heart was not. He thought about the cafeteria, the hallway, the 43 rejection letters stacked in a shoebox under his bed, the overturned crate behind the loading dock. Then he thought about his father's hands, calloused, stained. Sure. He wrote his name, Rashad Brooks, position, delivery associate, and walked out alone into the cold. The next morning, Garrett Sinclair saw the list. He read the names from top to bottom, stopped at the last one, read it again. Then he laughed so hard that the receptionist flinched. "Get a camera," he told his assistant. "I want this on the live stream, every second of it." He pulled out his phone and typed a message to the production team. "Make sure everyone sees who signed up last. This is going to be the best part of the whole show." Rashad clocked in at 5:48 a.m., pushed his cart through the lobby, saw Garrett standing by the registration board with 4 engineers, pointing at his name, laughing. One of them mimicked turning a wrench with a limp wrist. He kept walking, kept pushing the cart, didn't slow down, didn't speed up. But inside his jacket pocket, his fingers closed around a folded piece of paper, a page torn from his father's notebook. The handwriting was faded, but the words were burned into memory. Machines don't care about your skin color. They only care if your hands know what they're doing. But what Garrett Sinclair didn't know, what no one in that building had ever bothered to find out, was that Rashad Brooks had been building engines since before Garrett learned how to spell the word. And what happens next? Stay with me, because this competition is about to turn cobalt engineering upside down. The night before the competition, Rashad sat on the edge of his bed in the small apartment he shared with his sister. The room was bare. One window, one lamp, a mattress on the floor and a dresser with a missing drawer. Janelle was asleep in the next room with her textbook still open on her lap. Rashad reached under the bed and pulled out a metal toolbox. Dented, scratched, heavy. The latches were worn smooth from years of opening and closing. He unclipped them and lifted the lid. Inside, each tool sat in its place. Wrenches, pliers, socket sets, a torque wrench with a cracked handle wrapped in electrical tape. Every piece had been used thousands of times. Every piece had belonged to his father. Curtis Brooks had been a mechanic. Not the kind with a shop and a sign out front. The kind who worked out of a one-car garage behind a rented house on the south side of Detroit. The garage had no heat in winter and no fan in summer. The floor was cracked concrete, stained with 30 years of motor oil. A single bulb hung from the ceiling on a frayed wire. And under that light, Curtis Brooks could fix anything with an engine and a pulse. Rashad was 6 years old the first time his father put a wrench in his hand. He remembered sitting on an overturned 5-gallon bucket, watching Curtis lean into the open hood of a 1987 Ford F-150. The truck belonged to a neighbor who couldn't afford a real shop. Curtis charged him $20 and a case of root beer. "Come here," Curtis said. "Put your hand right on the block." Rashad climbed off the bucket and placed his small palm flat against the warm metal. "Close your eyes. What do you hear?" "It's shaking." "That's not shaking. That's talking." Curtis wiped his hands on a rag and looked at his son. "Every engine has a heartbeat, Rashad. If you listen long enough, it'll tell you exactly where it hurts." That was the first lesson. There were hundreds more. By 8, Rashad could disassemble a carburetor blindfolded. By 10, he was rebuilding lawnmower engines for neighbors at $5 each. By 13, he pulled a seized V8 out of a junkyard Chevy, cleaned every single part by hand, and put it back together on the garage floor. It ran on the first try. Curtis stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and said nothing. He just nodded. That nod meant more than any diploma ever could. Curtis died when Rashad was 16. Forklift accident at the warehouse where he worked nights to cover rent. No safety harness, no workers' compensation, no life insurance. The company sent a card. Rashad threw it away. He dropped out of school the same month, started working, gas station, car wash, hauling scrap metal, whatever paid, whatever kept the lights on for Janelle. 16 years old with grease-stained hands and the responsibilities of a grown man. But every night, after whatever job he'd worked that day, Rashad went back to the garage, his father's garage. He kept the bulb on, kept the tools clean, kept the floor swept, and he kept building. In 5 years, Rashad fixed over 500 engines. Cars, trucks, generators, boat motors, industrial compressors. Anything with moving parts that people couldn't afford to take to a real shop. He charged whatever they could pay. Sometimes $50, sometimes a bag of groceries. He never turned anyone away. And he never once had to give a single dollar back, because every engine he touched came back to life. He taught himself from library books, free technical manuals, and YouTube videos watched on a cracked phone screen at 2 in the morning. He memorized torque specifications, the way other people memorized song lyrics. He could identify an engine model by the sound of its idle from across a parking lot. His hands knew things no classroom could teach. His ears heard things no diagnostic machine could detect. All of it, every hour, every engine, every callus on his fingers, started in that garage, under that single bulb, next to a man who believed that honest hands were worth more than any title on a business card. Rashad closed the toolbox, picked up the small leather notebook from the dresser, his father's notebook. The pages were soft and yellow. The handwriting was small, precise, mechanical, like the man who wrote it. Hundreds of entries. Engine types, torque specs, wiring diagrams, personal notes in the margins. He turned to the last page, the one he'd read 1,000 times. The ink was fading, but the words never did. Machines don't care about your skin color. They only care if your hands know what they're doing. Rashad closed the notebook, put it in his backpack next to the toolbox, turned off the lamp. Tomorrow, his hands would do the talking. Saturday morning, 7 a.m. The ground floor of Cobalt Engineering had been transformed overnight. The usual reception area was gone. In its place stood 3 competition stations, each built on a raised steel platform under industrial lighting. Red tarps covered 3 mystery engines. LED screens lined the walls, showing a live stream countdown clock and a viewer counter already climbing. 4 cameras on tripods, 2 roaming operators with shoulder rigs, a production crew running cables across the polished concrete. The air smelled like fresh paint and machine oil. An arena dressed up as a laboratory. By 8 a.m., over 200 people filled the viewing area behind a rope barrier. Cobalt employees in weekend clothes, engineers who had come on their day off just to watch, partners, investors, and board members who had flown in from 3 states for what Howard Sinclair called the most important talent search in the company's history. Howard himself sat in the front row, wearing a simple navy polo and khakis. No suit, no tie. The man who built a billion-dollar company from a rented garage, still dressed like he worked in one. His arms were crossed. His eyes moved slowly across the 8 stations, studying each contestant the way he used to study engine blueprints. 8 contestants stood behind their assigned stations. 7 wore pressed lab coats with names embroidered on the chest. They carried equipment cases filled with diagnostic tools, laptops, oscilloscopes, and proprietary software worth more than most people's cars. Wesley Dunn, a senior engineer with 15 years at Cobalt, organized his station with military precision. Every cable coiled, every tool at right angles. 2 engineers from the propulsion team compared notes in low voices. Garrett Sinclair stood at Station 1, rolling up his sleeves with theatrical confidence, a brand new snap-on tool set worth $15,000 gleaming under the lights. He had angled his lamp so the tools caught the light for the cameras. He wanted everyone to see. He wanted everyone to know this was already over. At Station 8, Rashad Brooks stood in a plain gray t-shirt and work jeans. No lab coat, no laptop, no embroidered name. On his table sat one item, his father's toolbox. The dents and scratches looked almost offensive under the bright studio lights, surrounded by thousands of dollars of polished chrome on every other table. A few engineers glanced at it and looked away. One smirked. Another whispered something to the person beside him. The word janitor carried just far enough for Rashad to hear. He didn't react. He had heard worse. Brenda Holloway stepped up to the microphone. "Welcome to the Engine Masters Challenge. Live stream is active." She glanced at the screen. 52,000 viewers and climbing. She introduced the rules. 3 rounds. Round 1, diagnostics. Identify the exact fault in a disabled engine. Round 2, Creative repair with limited resources. Round 3. Full engine assembly from salvage parts. Each round eliminates half the field. Last one standing wins the $1 million prize and a full-time lead engineer contract on Cobalt's flagship project. Then, she introduced the judges. Our head judge needs no introduction to anyone in this industry. 30 years of experience, 14 patents, former lead designer of the Merlin engine program at SpaceX. She has judged competitions at MIT, Stanford, and Caltech. Ladies and gentlemen, Elaine Crawford. Elaine stood, 62 years old, silver hair in a tight bun, sharp eyes behind wire-framed glasses, black blazer over a white shirt. She carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had earned every ounce of respect in rooms where it was never given freely. The room applauded. She nodded once, sat back down, didn't smile, didn't need to. The viewer count hit 85,000. That was when Garrett made his move. He stepped away from his station and walked toward Rashad, slow enough that every lens could track him. The crowd noise dropped to nothing. A camera operator swung around for a tighter angle. Garrett stopped 3 feet from Rashad, looked him up and down, let the silence build for 3 full seconds. Then he spoke, loud enough for every microphone to catch. "Someone like you dares to register for this competition." Rashad didn't step back. "I'll participate, sir." Garrett reached for the clipboard on the judge's table, found Rashad's form, tore it in half. The sound cut through the room like a blade. "A delivery boy wants to be my rival?" He leaned in close. "Do you even know what an engine looks like? Or do you just bring parts to those who do?" "I know what a broken engine sounds like." Garrett's face twisted. Something behind his eyes shifted, amusement to rage. He pulled the Ferrari key from his pocket and slammed it against Rashad's chest, hard enough to leave a mark through the thin cotton. 1 hour. Fix the engine. Live. You fail, you crawl out on your knees. Deal? Rashad caught the key before it hit the floor, held it to the light, turned it between calloused fingers. "An hour is too generous, Mr. Sinclair." Gently, calmly. 5 minutes. The laughter building in the crowd died before it broke. The room went still. 200 people held their breath without knowing it. Elaine Crawford leaned forward in her chair. She hadn't taken her eyes off Rashad since he caught the key. She studied his hands, then the toolbox on his table. She noticed the wear on the latches, the oil stains on the canvas lining, the way each tool had been placed with the care of someone who treated them like family heirlooms rather than equipment. Then she saw the wrench. 12 inches, chrome vanadium steel. 2 letters hand-engraved near the head. C.B. Her eyes stayed on those letters for a long moment. Her expression didn't change, but her posture did. She sat up straighter, uncrossed her arms, and when Brenda looked over to ask if the competition should proceed, Elaine gave one word: proceed. The countdown clock lit up. 60 minutes. The red tarps were pulled away. Underneath, 3 identical industrial diesel engines sat under white lights like patients on operating tables, waiting to be understood. Howard Sinclair leaned forward in his seat, knuckles white. Nolan Tucker stood at the very back of the room, arms folded, jaw tight. The live stream counter crossed 120,000 viewers. The hashtag Engine Masters Challenge began trending on 3 platforms simultaneously. Garrett cracked his knuckles, pulled on pristine black nitrile gloves, adjusted his station light. He looked confident. He looked ready. He looked like a man who had never lost anything in his life. Rashad opened his father's toolbox. The latches clicked with a sound that was almost musical, a sound he had heard 10,000 times in a garage with no heat and 1 hanging bulb. He picked up the wrench with the engraved initials, held it for 1 quiet moment, felt the weight settle into his palm like a handshake from someone who wasn't there anymore. Then he looked at the engine, and the engine, in a way that only Rashad could understand, looked back. Brenda Holloway's voice cut through the charged air like a starting pistol. "Round 1 begins now." The clock started. 8 hands reached for 8 different tools, but only one pair stayed still. Rashad didn't touch anything. He closed his eyes, placed both palms flat on the engine block, and simply listened. The other 7 contestants plugged in laptops, connected OBD diagnostic scanners, booted proprietary software. Wesley Dunn attached an oscilloscope to the fuel system and began running waveform analysis. Garrett connected his diagnostic tablet and tapped through menus with polished confidence. The room hummed with electronics powering up, cables clicking into ports, keyboards clacking. Rashad stood motionless, eyes closed, palms on warm metal. Garrett glanced over from Station 1, snorted loud enough for the cameras. He's praying to it. A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd. The live stream chat scrolled with confused messages. What is he doing? Is he sleeping? This has to be a joke, right? Brenda Holloway asked the technician to start each engine for a 5-second diagnostic cycle. One by one, the engines coughed to life across the row. Each ran for 5 seconds. Each shut down. When Rashad's engine fired, he didn't open his eyes. His fingers pressed harder into the block. His head tilted left. Held. Then right. Held. The engine died. Rashad opened his eyes. They were sharp, certain, calm. He picked up a grease pencil from his toolbox and wrote directly on the engine block, next to the 3rd cylinder. Injector 3. Solenoid valve jammed open by metal fragment. Approximately 0.8 millimeters. Caused by incorrect torque during installation. Over-tightened, creating abnormal wear. Failure onset approximately 200 operating hours ago. He set the pencil down, stepped back, folded his arms quietly. The clock read 56:48, 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Elaine Crawford was already on her feet. She walked to Rashad's station without hurrying, her heels clicking on the concrete. Put on nitrile gloves, removed injector number 3 with practiced hands, pulled the solenoid valve apart, tilted it under the station light. A metal fragment, barely visible, fell out and landed on the steel table with a tiny ping that the nearest microphone picked up. Elaine held the fragment between thumb and forefinger, studied it, looked at Rashad. How did you know the size? The pitch changes when the valve tries to close against an obstruction. Full blockage sounds different from partial. That was partial. Sub-millimeter. The harmonic told me the rest. Elaine placed the fragment on the table, turned to the camera. His diagnosis is correct, 100%. The fragment measures 0.78 millimeters. She paused. He was off by 0.02 of a millimeter, using nothing but his ears. The crowd didn't cheer. They were too stunned to make noise. The live stream hit 180,000 viewers. Wesley Dunn, who had completed his own diagnosis at the 14-minute mark using professional equipment, stood at his station, staring at Rashad with his mouth slightly open. Garrett stared at his own diagnostic screen. He had identified the fault as a fuel pump malfunction. He was wrong. Completely wrong. 4 contestants were eliminated after round 1. Remaining, Rashad, Garrett, Wesley, and a propulsion engineer named Caldwell. But everyone in the room already sensed where this was headed. Round 2 began immediately. Each contestant received an identical hybrid engine with 5 deliberately sabotaged points in the fuel injection system. Task: repair the system using only materials found in a randomized bin of salvage parts. No standard replacements, no catalog parts, no manufacturer specifications. 30 minutes. Wesley opened his bin and categorized parts with careful precision. Caldwell sketched a repair plan on paper before touching anything. Garrett dug through his bin with increasing frustration, tossing parts aside, searching for components that matched the originals. They weren't there. That was the entire point of the round. Rashad looked into his bin for 60 seconds without touching a single part. His eyes moved slowly, cataloging, calculating. Then he began doing something that made Elaine Crawford stand up from her chair for the 2nd time that morning. He started building replacement parts from scratch. He cut a section of copper tubing from a salvaged radiator core. bent it by hand into a fuel rail bypass, matching the curve of the original within visible tolerance. He pulled a solenoid valve from a broken industrial washing machine motor buried at the bottom of the bin, a component that no formally trained engineer would ever think to associate with a fuel injection system. But Rashad saw what others couldn't see. The valve's bore diameter, flow rate, and voltage rating were close enough to work. He filed the mounting flange to fit the injector housing using a hand file from his father's toolbox. Smooth, measured strokes. No hesitation, no second guessing. Then he did what no one in the room expected. Instead of repairing all 5 sabotage points individually, Rashad rerouted the entire fuel delivery path. He bypassed the 2 most severely damaged sections completely, creating a shorter, more direct fuel line using the copper tubing he had shaped by hand. The new path eliminated 2 failure points by removing them from the circuit entirely. It was not a repair. It was a completely new topology. He connected the last fitting, wiped his hands on his jeans, stepped back from the table. Clock, 41:18, 11 minutes and 42 seconds. Rashad's engine started on the first turn, ran clean, smooth, no leaks, no hesitation, no stumble. Elaine walked over with a portable flow meter, connected it carefully, read the output, then read it a second time, slower. She turned to the room and the cameras. This engine is not just repaired. It has been redesigned. She held the meter toward the nearest camera. Fuel consumption is down 12% compared to the factory specification. He didn't fix the problem. He improved the entire system. The crowd broke open. Applause erupted. Shouts. Phones raised and waving. The live stream chat became unreadable. Messages scrolling faster than anyone could follow. The viewer counter passed 250,000. The hashtag #DeliveryBoyEngineer appeared for the first time and began climbing every platform it touched. Wesley finished at 28 minutes. His engine ran but showed slight fuel pressure fluctuation under load. Respectable, professional, not extraordinary. Caldwell timed out at 30 minutes with an incomplete repair. Garrett finished at 29 minutes. His engine ran for 40 seconds, then began leaking from a fitting he had over-tightened in his rush. He kicked his station table. The cameras caught every single frame. Caldwell was eliminated on points. 3 remained for the final round: Rashad, Garrett, and Wesley. Round 3, the ultimate test. Each contestant received an identical pile of salvage: cracked engine blocks, loose pistons, bent connecting rods, mismatched bolts, worn gaskets, rusted valve springs. The task: assemble a complete functional 4-cylinder engine from scratch. No instructions, no blueprints, no digital assistance of any kind. 60 minutes. The live stream hit 310,000 viewers. The room was shoulder to shoulder. People stood on chairs along the back wall. Howard Sinclair had not moved from his front row seat since round 1 began. Wesley laid out every component on his table, sorting by type and size before touching a single wrench. Methodical, careful. The approach of a man with 15 years of formal training. Garrett ripped through the parts pile with shaking hands. His face was slick with sweat. His pristine nitrile gloves were already torn at the fingertips. He knew the cameras were watching. He knew the audience had already chosen their hero, and he knew it wasn't him. Rashad stood still for 30 seconds. His eyes moved across the salvage pile the way a chess master scans a board, not piece by piece, but as a complete picture. And then he began. His hands moved with a rhythm that didn't belong in a competition. It belonged in a small garage on the south side of Detroit with one hanging light bulb. He selected pistons by rolling them across the glass surface of his table, checking roundness by eye and touch. He measured bearing clearances with his fingertips, pressing the shell into the journal and feeling for the exact resistance that told him the fit was right. He balanced the crankshaft by hand, weighing each counterweight against the others, filing grams of metal at a time with patient precision until the shaft spun freely on 2 V-blocks without favoring either side. This was blueprinting. The old way. The way Curtis Brooks had taught his son on Saturday mornings before the sun came up. No machines, no computers. Just hands trained over 15 years to feel the difference between right and almost right. At 45 minutes, Rashad connected the final component. A hand-adjusted valve train, shimmed to within factory specification, using a feeler gauge so old the markings had worn off its blade. He didn't need the markings. He knew the thickness by touch. He stepped back, took one breath, pulled the manual starter cord. The engine fired, caught, settled into a smooth, even idle at 800 RPM. No vibration, no knock, no smoke, no oil seep, nothing but clean, honest power. Built from salvage, built from junk, built from things other people had thrown away. Wesley finished at 56 minutes. His engine ran but carried a slight tremor at higher RPM. Respectable work, solid. The output of a good engineer doing his honest best. Garrett was still working when the clock hit 60. His engine turned over once, coughed, died. He slammed both fists on the table. The sound echoed through the dead, silent room like a verdict being handed down in court. Elaine Crawford connected her instruments to Rashad's engine. Compression test, uniform across all 4 cylinders. Oil pressure, rock steady. Power output, 8% above factory specification for a brand new engine of identical displacement. She stared at the readings for a long time, then at Rashad, then at the pile of scrap metal he had built it from. The viewer counter on the LED screen read 380,000. Someone near the front of the crowd started clapping. Then another person joined. Then the entire room rose to its feet. Rashad stood at his station, still, hands at his sides. The wrench with the engraved initials sat on the table beside an engine his father had taught him how to build. He didn't bow. He didn't wave. He just stood there and let the sound wash over him like something he had been waiting to hear his entire life. The applause faded. Elaine Crawford raised her hand. The room obeyed. "Before I announce the results," she said, "I want to run one more test." She looked at all 3 engines. A full load test. On camera. Let the machines speak for themselves. The technician connected each engine to a dynamometer, a device that measures power output under increasing resistance. The test would push each engine from idle to maximum load. Any weakness in assembly, any flaw in tolerance, any shortcut in construction would show up here. There was nowhere left to hide. Wesley's engine went first. It ran clean at 50% load. 75%, a slight vibration crept in. At full load, the tremor became audible, a consistent rattle from the valve train. The numbers on the dynamometer screen were respectable, but declining. Wesley watched his readings and nodded slowly. He knew. Good, but not great. Garrett's engine was next. The technician turned the key. The starter motor cranked. The engine caught for half a second, then died. He tried again. Same result. Third attempt. Nothing. Not even a cough. Garrett stood behind his station with his jaw clenched so tight a vein pulsed at his temple. His $15,000 tool set sat on the table, gleaming and useless. The cameras recorded every silent second. Then Rashad's engine. The technician started it. The idle was smooth. 800 revolutions per minute, steady as a heartbeat. The dynamometer began increasing load. 50%. The engine didn't flinch. 75%. The tone deepened, but the rhythm held. 100%. Full load, maximum resistance. The engine ran like it had been assembled in a factory by a team of 20. No vibration, no rattle, no fluctuation. The power output number on the screen climbed past the factory specification and kept going. Elaine read the final numbers off the dynamometer display. She read them twice. Then she turned to Rashad. 8% above factory spec, from salvage parts, assembled by hand. "Young man, where did you learn to do this?" Rashad's answer was quiet enough that the room had to hold its breath to hear it. "My father's garage, ma'am. south side of Detroit. Elaine didn't respond right away. She walked to Rashad's station, stood beside the engine he had built. Her eyes moved across the assembly, the hand-balanced crankshaft, the custom-shimmed valve train, the bearing surfaces polished to a mirror finish using nothing but a sheet of emery cloth and patience. Then her gaze dropped to the toolbox, to the wrench sitting on top, to the 2 letters engraved on the steel. C.B. She picked it up, turned it in her hands, ran her thumb across the engraving the way someone touches a name on a headstone. Curtis Brooks. She said the name softly, not a question. Rashad went still. You knew my father? I knew his name. Elaine set the wrench down gently. 20 years ago, a resume crossed my desk at a manufacturing firm in Dearborn. Curtis Brooks, self-taught mechanical engineer. The portfolio was extraordinary. Hand-drawn engine diagrams, performance data from engines he had rebuilt, reference letters from every neighbor on his block. I recommended him for an interview. She paused. He never got one. The hiring manager looked at the address, looked at the name, and put the file in a drawer. I found out 3 months later. By then the position was filled. She looked at Rashad. I wrote a letter of complaint. It didn't change anything, and I've carried that failure with me for 20 years. The room was completely still. 380,000 people watched through their screens. No one typed in the chat. No one moved in the crowd. Elaine placed her hand on the engine Rashad had built. The metal was still warm. Your father should have been an engineer. He should have had this. She gestured at the lab, the cameras, the crowd. All of it. He deserved every door that was closed in his face. Her voice caught for just a moment. I won't make that mistake again. She turned to the cameras, straightened her blazer. The results of the Engine Masters Challenge are as follows. 3rd place, Wesley Dunn, a skilled and dedicated engineer. Wesley nodded from his station. 2nd place, Garrett Sinclair. Garrett didn't move. 1st place, by a margin I have never seen in 30 years of judging competitions at any level, Rashad Brooks. Howard Sinclair rose from his chair, started clapping. The sound was sharp and alone for 1 second. Then Nolan Tucker joined from the back of the room. Then the engineers. Then the investors. Then everyone. The standing ovation lasted a full 45 seconds. Rashad stood at his station with his father's wrench in his hand. His eyes were red and shining. His jaw was tight. He did not cry, but his fingers closed around the wrench so hard his knuckles turned white, as if Curtis Brooks were squeezing back. The ovation ended. Elaine Crawford stepped forward with a black folder in her hands. Rashad Brooks, on behalf of the judging panel and Cobalt Engineering, I am pleased to award you the Engine Masters Challenge Grand Prize, $1 million, and a full-time contract as lead engineer on Cobalt's next-generation engine project, effective immediately. She opened the folder and handed Rashad a pen. He signed his name at the bottom of the contract, the same name he had written on the registration sheet alone in an empty lobby 3 days earlier. But this time, 200 people and 380,000 viewers watched him do it. Elaine wasn't finished. She removed a second document from the folder. This is a personal sponsorship, a full scholarship to Georgia Institute of Technology, mechanical engineering program. Tuition, housing, books, and a monthly stipend, funded by the Crawford Engineering Foundation. She looked at Rashad over her glasses. This young man doesn't need a degree to prove he's an engineer, but he deserves one, and every door that comes with it. Rashad stared at the document. His hand trembled as he took it. He didn't sign it yet. He just held it carefully. Howard Sinclair walked to the stage. His handshake was firm and calloused, the hands of a man who had actually built things before he learned to manage people who built things. Son, I started this company from a garage with $40 and a borrowed socket set. Howard held the handshake a beat longer than necessary. Welcome home. Nolan Tucker stood at the back of the room. He didn't clap. He couldn't. His hands were covering his face. Then came the Ferrari key. Garrett had left it on the judge's table after his engine failed. Brenda Holloway picked it up and walked it to Rashad. The crowd waited. The cameras tightened their frames. Rashad looked at the key, held it in his palm for a long moment. Then he set it down on the table, gently, deliberately. "I didn't come here for a car, ma'am." He looked into the nearest camera. "I came here to be seen." The live stream chat exploded. The clip would be cut and shared and viewed 4 million times before midnight. The celebration was still running when Brenda Holloway felt her phone vibrate. She stepped away from the crowd and read the message from the head of building security. Then she read it again. Then she walked straight to Howard Sinclair and whispered 4 words in his ear. Howard's face changed. Not anger, something worse. Disappointment so deep it looked like grief. 20 minutes later, Howard, Elaine, Brenda, and 2 members of the board sat in the 4th-floor security office. On the monitor in front of them, a grayscale camera feed played footage from 11:14 the previous night. The hallway outside the competition preparation room. Empty, silent. Then a figure appeared at the end of the corridor. Garrett Sinclair. Still in his suit from the office, he walked to the door, swiped his VP access badge, and entered. The timestamp showed he stayed inside for 6 minutes and 22 seconds. A second camera inside the room captured what he did. He opened the sealed competition files, photographed every page of every round, diagnostics, repair parameters, salvage inventory, with his phone. Then he put the files back, closed the folder, and walked out. He didn't look at the camera. He didn't think anyone would ever check. 6 minutes, 3 rounds of questions, every answer in advance. And he still lost, all 3 rounds, to a delivery boy with a dead man's toolbox. The board convened an emergency session that evening. Howard Sinclair sat at the head of the table. His voice was flat and controlled, the way a man sounds when one wrong word might break him. Garrett Sinclair is terminated from his position as Vice President of Engineering, effective immediately. His access credentials are revoked. His name is removed from the succession plan. He paused, looked at the empty chair where his son should have been sitting. "I gave that boy every advantage a father could give, every school, every open door, and he chose to cheat." Howard's voice dropped. He chose to cheat against a kid who had nothing, who rode a bicycle 14 miles to deliver boxes in a building with his family's name on it, and he still couldn't win. Howard closed the folder. "He's not my successor. He never was." Garrett was escorted from the building the next morning by 2 security guards. He carried a single box of personal items. He didn't speak, didn't look back. The Ferrari sat in his reserved parking spot. The keys were no longer his. By Monday, the story had broken. Tech blogs ran headlines. Cobalt VP cheated in company's own competition, lost anyway. LinkedIn posts from industry professionals went viral, dissecting the footage frame by frame. 3 YouTube channels produced video breakdowns of the competition that collectively gathered over 12 million views in the first week. Every one of them ended with the same clip. Rashad setting down the Ferrari key and saying, "I came here to be seen." Garrett Sinclair's name became unsearchable in a professional context without the word cheating appearing beside it. He applied to 4 engineering firms in the months that followed. None called back. The industry he had been born into, the industry his father had helped build, no longer had a place for him, because of what he had done with his name. No charges were filed, no lawsuits, no public shaming beyond what the footage showed. Garrett wasn't destroyed by anyone. He was destroyed by the distance between who he pretended to be and who he actually was. And that distance, it turned out, was exactly the width of a security camera lens. 6 months later, Rashad Brooks sat in a laboratory at Georgia Tech. White lab coat on his shoulders. Beside his laptop sat 2 things. A framed photograph of Curtis Brooks leaning against a Ford F-150 in a 1-bulb garage, and a 12-inch wrench engraved CB. His phone buzzed. A message from Elaine Crawford. "Board meeting tomorrow. They want your input on the new engine line. Don't be late, Engineer Brooks." Rashad smiled, slipped the wrench into his lab coat pocket. Old habits. He walked out the door with his father's tools in his pocket, and a future his father never got to have.